My son gave me a house for my 63rd birthday. Then he drove away and left me there. On my 63rd birthday, my son drove me deep into the countryside to a place forgotten by time. He stopped the car beside a dilapidated, weather-beaten shack, its windows boarded up, its porch sagging under the weight of neglect. He handed me my old canvas bag and said, "This is your gift. You live here now." Then he left. He drove away, leaving me standing in a cloud of dust, surrounded by the deafening silence of the sticks. He thought he was leaving me with nothing. He couldn't have imagined that he was leaving me with everything I would need to find myself again. And he had no idea about the neighbour who was already watching from the house next door, a man who would soon become my unlikely guardian angel. Hello, my dear listeners. Thank you for joining me. If you find solace in stories of resilience and new beginnings, please consider subscribing to the channel and hitting that like button. I always find such joy and wonder in reading the comments and seeing all the different cities and countries you're listening from, so please don't be shy. Now, please make yourself comfortable. Happy listening. For most of my life, I believed my story wasn't one worth telling. I lived quietly, fading into the background of my own existence. Even in the condo my late husband Paul and I bought with so much hope decades ago, I had slowly become a ghost, a piece of furniture that was in the way, a shadow in the corners. For the last 10 years, that home hadn't truly been mine. It belonged to the vibrant, demanding life of my son, Darren, and his wife, Tiffany. I was relegated to the smallest room, the one that was once a storage closet. My books, Paul's photographs, the old armchair where he used to read the newspaper. They were all slowly exiled there, making space for Tiffany's love of trendy, bright, and impersonal decor. I never complained. What was the point? My son's happiness was all that mattered. My days followed a strict, silent routine. I would rise at 6 a.m. before anyone else, moving through the quiet house like a whisper. I'd tiptoe into the kitchen to start the grits for Darren and brew 2 different teas, a strong black tea for him and a delicate, expensive herbal blend for Tiffany, a concoction that always left a strange, floral tickle in my own throat. I'd brew a simple cup for myself and drink it alone in my room, just to stay out of sight. My entire social security check was deposited directly into our joint account. "Mama, why would you need your own money?" Darren would ask, his eyes avoiding mine. "We take care of everything for you?" And I would nod. He was right. Why would I need money? My clothes were worn and outdated, my outings limited to the grocery store and the pharmacy. All my own desires had withered away, shrinking down to a single burning wish to see my son happy. I remember the day I gave them the savings I'd been setting aside for cataract surgery. Tiffany had desperately needed a new designer handbag. "Mummy, you understand, don't you?" she had cooed, draping her arms over my shoulders. "Darren's colleagues are so high status, I have to keep up. It's crucial for his career." Darren had looked at me with such gratitude, so I gave them the money. And later, I just bought myself stronger reading glasses. My voice held no weight in that house. If I mentioned the soup was too salty, Tiffany would purse her lips and say, "Mommy, your taste buds are just fading with age." If I dared offer advice, drawn from a lifetime of experience, Darren would gently cut me off. "Mama, things are different now. We'll figure it out ourselves." And they did figure it out. I became a function, the cook, the housekeeper, the interest-free ATM, an invisible woman whose presence was convenient, but whose personhood was entirely unnecessary. In the evenings, I'd sit in Paul's old armchair, look at his photograph, and ask him, "Paul, did we raise him right? He's a good boy, isn't he? This is just how life is now." My husband, forever silent in that frame, offered no answers. So I convinced myself that this self-erasure was a mother's ultimate sacrifice. Then my 63rd birthday arrived. I expected little, perhaps a small bouquet of daisies or a box of the dark chocolate I loved. But that morning, Tiffany was unexpectedly affectionate. She even hugged me, her voice a bright chirp. "Happy birthday, Mommy! Darren and I have such a surprise for you. You're going to be so shocked." I confess, I felt a thaw inside me, a forgotten childhood flutter of anticipation. Darren was strangely agitated, constantly checking his watch. "Get ready, Mama," he said, his voice tight. "We're going to pick up your gift." I put on my best dress, a simple gingham with a small floral print. In the mirror, I saw an elderly woman with tired eyes, but for a moment, they sparkled with a hint of hope. We got in the car. Tiffany stayed behind, claiming a headache. "You two go on," she said, waving us off. "Tell me all about it later." We drove for what felt like an eternity. The city streets melted into highways, which then gave way to dreary, barren fields and dense, unfamiliar woods. My attempts at conversation were met with curt, dismissive replies from Darren. "It's a surprise, Mama, you'll see." A cold knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach. This wasn't the road to a celebration. Finally, we turned onto a broken, potholed dirt track. The car jolted violently. All around us were abandoned fields, choked with weeds, and a scattering of crumbling, long-forgotten houses. Darren slammed on the brakes next to the most pathetic structure of them all, a shack, sinking into the earth, its roof bowed in defeat. "We're here," he announced, his voice flat and empty. I was silent. My mind refused to process the scene. He got out, opened the trunk, and pulled out my old weekend bag. He dropped it on the ground beside a thicket of thorny bushes. "There you go, Mama." He gestured vaguely toward the ruin. "This is your gift. Tiffany and I bought you a house, your own place with fresh air. You'll live here now. It'll be good for you." His words fell into the silence like stones into a deep, dark well. I looked at my son, and I didn't recognize the man standing before me. His face was a mask, his eyes glassy and vacant. There was no malice there, just a profound, weary irritation. "Darren," I whispered, my voice a frail thread. "What is this? Why?" "Mama, don't start." He grimaced. "We decided this is for the best. For everyone you need a rest from the city, and we need our own space. Tiffany is pregnant." He threw the last words at me like a trump card, a final justification for this abandonment. He didn't even look at me. He was already moving, already leaving. He got back in the car and slammed the door. I stood there, rooted to the spot, watching him through the windshield. The engine roared to life, shattering the stillness. And in that exact moment, something fundamental shifted inside me. It wasn't a surge of rage or a wave of despair, it was a sound. A clear, distinct, metallic click deep within my chest. It was the sound of a rusted lock, finally turning. And where a warm, forgiving love had lived for 63 years, there was now only a calm, crystal-clear ice. The car pulled away, churning up a cloud of dust. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I just watched the silver speck of his sedan shrink, vanish around a bend, and disappear from my life. The dust settled. The smell of exhaust faded. All that remained was me, my pathetic bag, this dead house, and a silence so profound I could hear my own heartbeat. And in that silence, for the first time in decades, I heard myself. Not the mother, not the mother-in-law, not the servant, but Evelyn Reed. And this Evelyn spoke to me in a voice that was steady and sure. That's it. Enough. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. And no one was going to take my life from me ever again. I was going to take it back. The dust coated the weeds like a fine powder. I stood motionless, listening until the last echo of the engine was swallowed by the landscape. When true quiet returned, it was a heavy, suffocating blanket. I turned slowly to face my gift. The timber was blackened by decades of sun and rain. The porch leaned precariously to one side, a gaping hole where a step had been. A jungle of weeds, wild raspberry canes, and bindweed formed an impenetrable wall around the property. It was a portrait of utter desolation, a place to be forgotten. But there were no tears. The ice in my chest had frozen them all. That cold, clear click had solidified everything despair had been left behind on the road, in the wake of my son's car. All that remained here was me and a sharp, ringing clarity. I walked toward the porch, my steps automatic, avoiding the rotten plank. I set my bag down and let my gaze sweep over the misery. But my mind was already far away, in my bright, clean condo on Peachtree Road, where Tiffany was likely already measuring my old room for new curtains. That was the key word. And in that moment, two long buried memories surfaced, rising through the ice like lifelines. The first was of Paul, 10 years before he passed. He was serious, his brow furrowed, as he laid documents on our kitchen table. "Evie," he'd said, looking me straight in the eye, "I'm going to the attorney tomorrow. I'm transferring my share of the condo entirely to you. You will be the sole owner." I had protested, but he was firm. "Our son is one thing, but life is long. Anything can happen. You are my everything, and I need to be sure you always have a roof over your head. Your roof." I had done as he asked. Darren never knew. He always assumed it was a joint inheritance. The second memory was from 5 years ago. A third cousin, someone I'd met only once, had passed away in Alabama, leaving me her modest apartment. I had handled the paperwork quietly, sold it, and placed every penny into a separate savings account. I never told a soul. It was my secret reserve, my final line of defense against a future I had feared, but never truly believed would come. The tools had been in my hands all along. I just hadn't known I needed to use them. I opened my bag. Inside, among the towels and a bar of soap, was my salvation, an old flip phone, the one Tiffany mockingly called my grandma phone. Its simple memory held the numbers that were now my most powerful weapons. I pressed the power button. The screen glowed to life, but showed a terrifying message: no service. My heart stuttered. I looked around at the valley surrounding me. I needed higher ground. Without a second thought, I plunged into the overgrown path leading up a nearby hill. Thistles snagged my dress, branches whipped my face, but I barely felt them. My eyes were locked on the phone screen, and then, at the crest of the hill, beneath a lonely, twisted cedar tree, two beautiful, faint signal bars appeared. It was enough. My first call was to Mr. Harrison at the bank. His familiar, weary voice answered. "Mr. Harrison, it's Evelyn Reed. I need you to do several things for me right now." My voice was astonishingly steady. "First, immediately revoke all powers of attorney and account access for my son, Darren Reed. Everything. Second, redirect all my pension deposits from the joint account to my personal savings account, the one from 5 years ago. And third, completely block his ability to even view my balances. Total financial isolation. From this moment on, every transaction requires my personal, direct authorization." There was a pause on the line. "Evelyn, are you sure?" "Absolutely." "Understood. It will be done within the hour." The first move was made. My second call was to Marcus Jones, the sharp, thorough attorney who had handled my cousin's estate. "Marcus, it's Evelyn Reed. I need your help. It's about my condo. I need to officially confirm my sole ownership and prepare documents to block any and all claims from third parties, specifically my son." He asked for documents, but I had none with me. "Start with the county records," I instructed. "Pull everything. You have my full authority." "The wheels are in motion, Mrs. Reed. You can count on me." I lowered the phone. The cold in my chest was no longer the cold of shock. It was the cold, hard feel of steel being forged. I walked back down the hill, and the shack looked different. It was no longer a tomb. It was a command post, a quiet, secluded headquarters for the war I had just declared, and I knew with absolute certainty that at that very moment in my condo, Darren and Tiffany were toasting with champagne, celebrating their cleverness. They were celebrating a victory they had already lost. The first few hours in the shack were spent in a strange, hyper-aware state. I sat on the porch as the sun set, painting the sky in watercolor hues of orange and purple. The air was thick with the scent of decay and damp earth, but also with something wild and free. It was nothing like the city. When darkness fell and the chill seeped into my bones, I knew I had to move. I used the flashlight on my phone to explore my new domain. The interior was a time capsule of neglect: a pot-bellied stove, a dust-covered table, an overturned stool. In one room, a sagging iron bed frame. In the other, nothing but rags. The house was asleep, but it was structurally sound. My first victory was finding a working well behind the house, its old windlass groaning in protest, but still drawing up cold, clear water. I found a bucket and hauled it inside, my back protesting the unfamiliar labour. For the next 2 days, I worked. I didn't allow myself to think about Darren or Tiffany. My world had shrunk to this house and this yard. I chopped wood, lit a fire in the stove, scrubbed floors, and stuffed an old mattress with fresh straw. I was a modern-day Robinson Crusoe, and the sheer physicality of the labour was cleansing my soul. Every evening I made my pilgrimage to the hilltop, my lifeline to the world I waited. I knew they would call. The call came on the 3rd evening. Darren's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring, then answered with a simple, "Yes." "Mama, finally! Where have you been?" His voice was laced with its usual condescending irritation. "Listen, there's a problem. Tiffany's card was declined at the store, your supplementary card. There's definitely money in the account. You need to call the bank and fix this. Tiffany is upset." The first ripple in their placid pond. I could picture it perfectly. Tiffany at some boutique, my card being declined, her indignation. "I hear you," I said, my voice quiet. Then I heard him, not quite covering the phone, say to someone nearby, "I don't know, she's just sitting there." And then, clear as day, Tiffany's voice, sharp and contemptuous. "Why are you even talking to her? She's putting on a show, decided to act tough in her old age. She'll sit out there without a dime and she'll come crawling back. Tell her not to be stupid, tell her to go fix it. I need that dress." Senility, a show, sit without a dime. Those words didn't wound me. They were a final, definitive diagnosis. They confirmed everything. "Darren?" I said softly. "Yeah, Mama, so you'll call the bank?" "No, Darren," I replied, my voice clear as glass. "Figure it out yourselves," and I hung up. The days blended into a rhythm of survival and strategy. I explored the attic and found a treasure, a chest filled with old letters and a photo album of the family who had once lived here. Their faces, their lives stared back at me, and I felt a strange kinship. I was fighting not just for a roof, but for my own story, my own past. My evening calls with Marcus became my war council. And then he delivered the blow that tempered my resolve from steel to diamond. "Mrs. Reed," he said, his voice tense, "there's a complication. There's an encumbrance on your condo, a mortgage, a very large one taken out 8 months ago." The air left my lungs 8 months ago. I was sick, pneumonia, feverish, delirious. Tiffany had been so attentive, bringing me broth and papers. "Just a formality for the tax office, Mummy. Initial here, don't worry about it." They hadn't just evicted me, they had mortgaged my life, my future, while I lay helpless. This ruined house wasn't just a gift, it was a pre-dug grave where I was supposed to quietly disappear while they squandered my legacy. The last sliver of maternal connection turned to ash. This was no longer about getting my own back, this was about justice. The battle escalated quickly. Marcus moved forward, filing fraud complaints and notifying the bank. Their accounts were frozen. Their beautiful world was icing over. Their panic turned to desperation. They arrived at my shack with a delegation of relatives, staging an intervention. They tried to declare me insane, a senile old woman who had imagined it all. It was their dirtiest, most devastating gambit. And just as it seemed their lies might win, a calm voice cut through the drama. "May I be nosy? What's this gathering about?" It was my neighbour, Curtis Baker, Uncle Kurt. He stood there, solid as an oak, his clear blue eyes seeing straight through their charade. He dismantled their story piece by piece, bearing witness to the truth he had seen with his own eyes. A strong woman rebuilding her life, not a crazy one losing it. The relatives who had come as their jury turned on them. Shamed and defeated, Darren and Tiffany fled, their public trial ending in their absolute moral bankruptcy. That was the true end. I never heard from them again. The legal battles were won, the mortgage was voided. I sold the condo on Peachtree Road without a backward glance, keeping only my most precious things: Paul's chair, our photos, my books. The money gave me certainty. I hired help, but I worked alongside them, fixing the roof, building a new porch, making the shack into a true home. It became a bright, cozy cabin, filled with the smell of baking bread and crackling firewood. Uncle Kurt became my dear friend. We shared tea on the porch in the evenings, our comfortable silence saying more than words ever could. I planted a garden. I learned to embroider again. I found a stray kitten who purrs on my lap. My hands are rough now, but they are the hands of a living person, a person who builds her own life. I'm 65 now. Sometimes I think I should be grateful to Darren and Tiffany. Their cruelty was the catalyst that forced me to live. They wanted to bury me, and instead they gave me a world. They showed me the strength I never knew I possessed. Dignity, I've learned, isn't something given to you. It's what you claw back from fear and despair. It's the quiet, hard-won victory of choosing yourself. And that victory, that is true happiness. That is true freedom. Did you like my story? If you listened all the way to the end, please drop a number 1 in the comments below. If it resonated with you, you can support the channel by liking the video. I have many more stories like this, so please subscribe and explore. I've added 2 new stories on the screen that I think you'll love. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. With love, until next time.